Welcome everyone to another video discussion of free answer writing practice by Vajiram and Ravi. In this session, we are going to see 3 questions, 2 questions from GS1 Indian Society. Topics are social empowerment, communalism, regionalism and secularism. And 1 question would be from current affairs. Let us see the overview of those questions. The very first question we have is from regionalism, where we will be looking at certain kind of issues related to India's unity and integrity and which is threatened by regionalism. But we have to also critically examine this statement, so we will also see benefits of regionalism. The second question is with respect to Indian secularism, how it is unique, and we will be also talking about how it is distinct from Western secularism. The third question is a current affair based question where we have recently seen that how there was dismal polling turnout for Maoist affected region, and that is primarily because of the left wing extremism. So in that question we will be talking about certain issues and factors contributing to left wing extremism, and also will understand the measures undertaken by the government to eliminate left wing extremism in India. So let us start with the very first question. Let's read the question together. The growing sense of regionalism may seriously threaten India's unity and integrity. Critically examine. Now we do understand that regionalism as a phenomena have already planted various kind of issues in the unity and integrity of India's polity, but we have to critically examine, so we will be also looking at certain benefits that are derived from regionalism. So in this kind of question you have to structure the answer, where introduction you can define regionalism and also give context, as the statement itself is talking about growing sense of regionalism. In the body, the heading 1, you can support this statement and talk about that how regionalism threatens India's unity and integrity. And in the heading 2, you have to critically examine, where you will be talking about that how there are certain positive aspects of regionalism as well. And in the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead, where you can write how exactly certain measures can be taken to eliminate any negative impact of regionalism. So let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, you can define regionalism. Regionalism is an ideology through which people with the specific identity have certain loyalty towards the regional identity. Now that is something you can write for the definition. Now those regional identity have also sub identities where that can be derived from cultural identity, linguistic identity, food habits, etc. You can also talk about certain context over here. We have seen that how regional diversity, there is issue with respect to the quest of equitable recognition. We have also seen that there are constitutional provisions where there is explicit understanding of elimination of communalism, casteism and regionalism in India. We have to also see that how there are certain instances where Indians, they relate more to the regional identity than national identity. So these are the kind of context that you can derive from current affairs and you can imbibe in the introduction of your answer. Let us see the body, the heading 1. Over here we will talk about that how regionalism can pose a threat to India's unity and integrity. Firstly, we can talk about it fragments the national identity, as we have seen that people prefer to go with the regional identity rather than national identity. Thereby there is certain sense of discrimination. Over here it erodes the sense of unified Indian identity. We have seen that how people identify with their region's identity. Second, it can augment the risk of separatism. We have seen that regionalism may escalate to demand of separatism, especially there are certain instances such as the demand for Khalistan state. It also had led to certain instances of terrorist activities. Third, ethnic tension and conflict. Over here we have seen that how regionalism can also trigger tensions and conflicts between different groups. We have seen that how in Northeast, because of regionalism, there are certain degree of ethnic conflicts. And lastly, you can talk about that how regionalism, which is primarily because of economic disparity among different region, can increase the feeling of neglect and resentment in lesser developed region. Over here we are talking about relative deprivation. So that is something that can trigger the regionalism aspect which is threatening India's unity and integrity. So that is all for heading 1. Let us see in the heading 2 of the body what can we write, as we have to critically examine. So you can talk about certain benefits of regionalism which actually are strengthening the unity and integrity aspect of the nation. Firstly, you can talk about that how regionalism strengthens the democracy, as we do understand that regionalism directly refers to realizing the aspiration of the local population. So over here we are talking about ensuring local self-governance. You can also talk about decentralized form of governance and realizing grassroots democracy, right? So these are the kind of positive elements that regionalism can help. Over here you can give certain examples that how regional parties, they are ushering to ensure that the regional aspirations are realized. Second, you can talk about economic development, as we have seen that there is asymmetry in economic benefits with respect to different region. Through regionalism, people can voice their concern and aspire for equal distribution of resources. We have seen that how there are certain instances of regionalism which led to separation of certain regions, such as creation of state, and that led to development. So these are the instances through which regionalism have given advantages. You can talk about improved form of governance, as we are talking about devolution of power to local authorities, enhancing governance. Again, you can talk about how it is directly linked with strengthening democracy and ensuring the governance is also improved. You can talk about competitive federalism over here. Through regionalism, there is a good sense of healthy competition among different regions, thereby it is augmenting the national development. So over here you can talk about that how it is cooperative federalism. Then you can talk about preservation of local culture. As regionalism is all about local identity, it also helps with respect to safeguarding the local culture. We have seen various instances through which regional identity has helped with respect to maintaining the cultural diversity of the nation. So those are the benefits. Thus, we can talk about that how India is also making sure the unity and the integrity aspect is realized through regionalism. So that is all for the heading 2 of the body. In the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead. You can talk about that regionalism certainly have some degree of advantage. However, the negative aspects must be resolved in collaborative manner. To ensure every stakeholder is part of the decision making. So over here we are making sure that regionalism is not directly threatening the India's unity and integrity aspect, but rather it is strengthening the national development. So this is something you can write in the way ahead aspect. You can also talk about that how there is also need to ensure that there is personalized, as in asymmetric level of help from the central government to different regions to ensure that every region is developed. So we are eliminating the relative deprivation factor. So these are the kind of points that you can inculcate in the way ahead. Now let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, you can talk about the definition. You can also talk about certain instances where regionalism has impacted India's unity and integrity. Then you can talk about it how exactly it poses threat to unity and integrity. You can list down different proof points along with examples. In the second heading, you can talk about the benefits, as we are talking about critical analyze as the directive word. You can list down the benefits along with example. And in the last, you can talk about what exactly should be the future course of action so that regionalism negative impact are eliminated and the positive impacts are sustained. So that is something you can write in the conclusion of question number 1. Now let us see question number 2. Let's read the question together. Explain the numerous aspects of Indian secularism. Also discuss how Indian secularism is distinct from Western secularism. Now if you see previous year question, for secularism, similar kind of questions has been asked where there is direct demand, where you have to compare the Indian form of secularism with Western form of secularism. In this question, we will be dealing with the same. So if you structure the answer, you will realize in the introduction, you can define the secularism. You can also give certain context about Indian secularism. In the body, in the heading 1, you can talk about numerous aspects of Indian secularism along with certain substantiation. In the heading 2, you can draw a table and talk about its distinction with Western form of secularism. Over here, you can compare and contrast how Indian secularism is distinct from Western form of secularism. And in the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead. You can also cite certain kind of points to highlight that how Indian secularism has evolved. So that is something as a structure you can do for question number 2. Let's see in the introduction what can we write for the definition. Over here, you can start with the very basic definition of secularism, which refers to separation of the state and religious bodies. Separation here implies that none of them is going to interfere in each other's activity. So, no interference. So this is the kind of fundamental idea with respect to secularism. But however, Indian secularism is unique and does not follow the Western idea of secularism. So this is something you will write in the body. In the heading 1, you can talk about the numerous aspects of Indian secularism. The very first point you can start with is mutual respect. In India, we have seen that the religious diversity is unique and that has sustained because of the ideas such as Sarva Dharma Sambhavana. Over here, Sambhava, we have seen that how there is mutual respect for all religion. We have seen that people from any religious identity, they celebrate festivals of different religious groups as well. So this is the kind of mutual respect, and that is part of Indian secularism. We have seen that how it is rooted in India's uniqueness. We have seen that certain historical trajectory has led to inculcation of the religious diversity, and because of that, there is element of adaptation rather than conflict. Then we have seen that how there is element of state neutrality. State over here have not certain inclination to one specific religion, rather there is a form of neutrality over here. We have also seen that how state supports different religious groups to ensure there is equal treatment and development of all religious bodies. We have also seen there is element of protection of minority as in India's unique form of secularism. There is protection of minority over here. The constitution itself have certain elements to ensure that every religious group, especially the minority, they have certain safeguards and protection. So this is something you can write in the numerous aspect of Indian secularism. In the next heading, you can talk about the differences between India and Western secularism, as it is the direct demand. Over here, you can list down different aspects, as in you can talk about that Western form of secularism is a negative form of secularism because there is strict separation, whereas Indian form of secularism is a positive concept where there is equal respect for all religion and equal protection of all religion. Over here, there is no strict separation. There can be certain kind of inspiration for each other. State can take certain values of religious beliefs to ensure that the welfare of the citizens are at place. So this is the kind of non-strict separation between religion and state. We also have understanding that Western form of secularism has principle of strict neutrality, again non-interference in affairs of each other, whereas Indian form of secularism has the principle of principled distance, where there is interference to ensure that the fundamental rights are realized. We are also understanding that no public policy in the Western nations are based on religious indicators, whereas in India we have seen that secularism is unique in such a way that public policies also consider certain religious aspects to ensure that any group which is facing certain kind of issues with respect to development, they are given support. We have also understanding that there is single unified code of law for civil laws in Western nations. However, in India, the secularism is a bit different, where we have personal laws for different religious boards to ensure safeguarding of the cultural heritage that we have. So this is something you can write in the difference between India and Western form of secularism. In the conclusion, you can talk about that how secularism is part of the basic structure doctrine. And thus, It is imbibed as a constitutional value, and thus it is necessary to ensure that the constitutional value of secularism is realized in its true form in the nation. So that is something you can write in the conclusion, as in how exactly we should move ahead and ensure we safeguard the Indian form of secularism in its truest nature. So that is all for question number 2's conclusion. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can define secularism. In a transition line, you can talk about that how Indian form of secularism is unique. You can list down the numerous aspects of Indian secularism as it is the primary demand. Over here, you can list down different aspects and you can definitely give certain examples to justify those keywords. Then in the heading 2, you can talk about distinction between Indian and Western form of secularism along with relevant keywords, and in the last you can talk about how exactly secularism is part of basic structure of the nation as a constitutional value, and there is need to ensure that we safeguard the same. So that is all for question number 2. Let us move on to question number 3, which is a current affair based question. Let's read the question together. The dismal polling turnout in the Maoist affected area of Chhattisgarh is a pointer that democracy needs to be strengthened at the grassroots level. In the light of the statement, highlight the factors contributing to left-wing extremism and outline the measures undertaken by the government to eliminate left-wing extremism. So recently you have witnessed that we have seen election in Chhattisgarh, but however certain regions which were affected by left-wing extremism have dismal polling turnout. So this is something you can write in the introduction itself to give out the context. Over here, you can also talk about how left-wing extremism, which has direct impact not just on the social and economical aspect, but also on the political aspect of the region. So that is something you can imbibe in the introduction. In the body, you can start with the heading 1, where you can talk about the factors which are contributing to left-wing extremism. And in the heading 2, you can talk about the measures taken by the government to eliminate left-wing extremism. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can give way ahead like of points that what exactly other than the measures which government has taken, we need to ensure to be done to ensure that the left-wing extremism is eliminated. So that is all for the structure of the answer. In the introduction, as I mentioned, you can talk about the recent news about the Chhattisgarh election and how exactly the Maoist affected area, the left-wing extremism affected area have lower polling turnout. So that is something in the introduction you can talk about. In the body, in the heading 1, as you have to list down the factors contributing to left-wing extremism, you can give a heading reason behind left-wing extremism and you can list down different reasons such as there is socio-economic disparities. We have seen that historically those regions were affected, as in there were economic as well as social disparity, and that led to insurgency, which led to further augment the left-wing extremism. We have also seen that how there is element of alienation and unemployment. Now those areas also have certain population from tribal region, and those tribal region face certain degree of alienation as in because of the isolation as well as lack of focus by the government had led to alienation, and alienation has led to lack of development, which further augmented the issue of unemployment. So that is something you can talk about in second point. In the third point, you can talk about land rights and exploitation. We have seen despite various legislatures where there are certain forest rights which are delegated to the people who live there, but we have seen that how the government has not yet realized those rights at the fullest, and because of that kind of lack of attention, there is exploitation of those population. We have also seen failure of governance, as in because of corruption as well as lack of resources, that those regions are not able to realize the development that is necessary for the holistic development of the population, and thus failure of governance. And lastly, we have talked about that how there is need to tackle the historical grievances like displacement and disposition, and we have seen that how in the past there were certain events and uprising which has certain historical underlining. So you can talk about the reasons behind left-wing extremism in the heading 1. In the heading 2, you can talk about steps taken by government. You can further divide this heading into multiple aspects. Firstly, we can talk about security measures. We have seen to ensure the safeguard and protection of those regions. We have deployment of CAPF, we have strengthening of state police, and we have also specialized units such as Cobra Commandos and Greyhounds to ensure that there is protection of the local population as well as elimination of Naxalite leaders and the camps. Second subheading you can give about development initiatives, where government not just protecting the region but also have taken proactive steps to ensure there are developmental initiatives such as integrated development projects like tribal development program, Gram Sadak Yojana, have led to tackle issues where multiple dimensions of development are augmented. Next is skill development program to ensure that the youth of those region have relevant skill and thus eliminate the issue of unemployment. Next is sustainable livelihood program. We have seen Vandhan Vikas Kendras and MG, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, to create sustainable livelihood through forest based activity and rural employment for tribal communities. So these are the kind of initiatives and measures you can talk about as in taken by the government in the heading 2 of the body. In the conclusion, you can talk about the way ahead, like what exactly other measures are needed. You can talk about how there is need to ensure there is effective implementation of PISA Act. Over here, we are talking about ensuring grassroots democracy and thus empower the local population. You can talk about how we can nurture tribal leadership and ensure that they become the leaders and understand the issues and thus provide certain sustainable initiatives. We can talk about targeted development programs. We can talk about how there is need for comprehensive, long-term, proactive and inclusive governance, as well as we need to ensure that the social justice aspect is prioritized for sustainable development. And lastly, we can talk about that how there is need for peaceful negotiation to ensure that the human rights are protected and counter propaganda efforts are also in place. So this is something as a conclusion for question number 3 you can add. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. In the introduction, you can talk about how specifically left-wing extremism means and what exactly is the recent context, as we can talk about the low decimal polling turnout in the Maoist affected region of Chhattisgarh. Then in the heading 1 of the body, you can talk about the reasons behind left-wing extremism. You can list out the reason along with certain examples. In the heading 2, you can talk about the steps taken. You can talk about multiple dimensions such as security, development, and list out different initiatives and substantiate the same. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can give way forward, way ahead type of points. So that is all for question number 3. You're writing for free answer writing program by Vajiram and Ravi. So please keep writing and thank you so much.